What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Powerhouse Mentality Podcast. I am your host. I am Caitlin Kenna, and today's topic is focused around my story when it comes to overcoming addiction, when it comes to navigating through trauma, and really the biggest thing that it comes down to is being able to process trauma, navigate through it, and be able to overcome that feeling that you're always running away from something. And I know that a lot of us in life are going through a time right now where you feel like so overwhelmed by everything happening, or you feel like you're going through this tough time and you can't even imagine being able to get out and see a light. I get it. I've been there. We've all been there. And first of all, what I want to remind you is a couple things. One, you are undefeated on the toughest days of your life. No matter what, if you're sitting here, if you're listening to this podcast, then you've been able to overcome so much shit in your life. I promise you'll be able to overcome this. Number two, everything that you're going through right now will end. The darkness will not be forever. There is always a light, even if you can't see it. So remembering those two things alone should help decrease that anxiety a little bit, because, I wrote it actually in my journal today because I've been dealing with a little bit of anxiety, depression the last couple days, and I've been trying to, reflect upon it and figure out where it's stemming from, because when we have anxiety, when we have depression, when we have that feeling of overwhelming stress, it's coming from somewhere. But have you ever had that feeling and you have absolutely no idea? Like somebody asks you, why do you feel depressed or why do you feel anxious? And you just don't know. But there's always a reason, all right? And anxiety is focusing on things that we can't control. Anxiety is poor time management. Anxiety is you being afraid of the worst possible case scenario, right? And a lot of us allow anxiety or depression or stress to dictate our lives. We allow those things to literally guide us in life. And usually when that happens, we're just kind of skating or coasting through life, and we're not actually being intentional and purposeful with every moment that we have. And every single day that you go through where you're like that zombie of depression or anxiety, you're literally just living. You're not thriving. You're just there. You're not doing anything worthwhile. And to be quite honest, that sounds like a terrible way to live, because one day you're going to run out of time. And if you're wasting your days because you're overcome by this anxiety and this depression, then we need to do something about that, because, man, I can't even. There are times when I had my eating disorder, when I was in the thick of it, we'll say, where I was in the thick of that trauma, of that addiction, of that pain. And every single day, I couldn't even see another day. But looking back, I can't even remember those days. And that was like the prime of my life, right? I was a college student. It's supposed to be some of the best times of your life, where you're growing up, where you're going through a lot of different experiences. And I didn't experience shit because I can't remember any of it, because I was so caught up in this addiction. But where does addiction come from? Okay, and I heard a quote the other day that literally had me just like, oh shit. And I know we've all heard those things, and I'm not somebody who's like, oh, motivational quotes all the damn time. Hey, if you're able to use a motivational quote and you're able to actually use it in your life and take action upon it, then it's valuable. If you're just hearing it and you're just listening, you're just kind of adding it to your memory bank and it's never actually serving you, then what the fuck is the point? It's a lot of rah-rah shit. Take action on it. But I heard a quote yesterday, and it said, show me a man with an addiction, and I see a man with unprocessed trauma. So I really thought about that, because when I had an eating disorder, that was my addiction. And the addiction came from me trying to run away from unprocessed trauma. Unprocessed trauma from my childhood, from my father being addicted to drugs, from my family kind of falling apart, from the physical and emotional abuse I was facing at home, from the bullying at school. I felt like I could never get away from the shit. So I couldn't control anything else in my life, so I thought, but I could control the amount that I did or did not eat. And it became my addiction. Because what an addiction is, guys, it's just a mask. It's a mask to trauma that we are too afraid to face. And a lot of us say, oh, I can't accomplish this. I can't accomplish that. I can't do these things in life because I've gone through this trauma, this pain, this struggle. But in all reality, there are people out there who have been through more shit than you or the same shit as you, and they've been able to accomplish all of the things that you want and more. And that's where we have to really understand, like, there's a difference between an excuse and an obstacle. Now, an obstacle, it's inevitable. It's part of life. They're going to come up all the time. The journey is full of obstacles and hurdles, right? They are not always ideal, but there's always a solution to these obstacles. And what an excuse is what we tell ourselves, or what we convince ourselves as being a reason to why we cannot overcome the obstacle. So think about that. What I tell my clients, guys, if you look for an excuse, you're going to find it. So what you have to do is, instead of looking at life as this straight path from point A to point B, from where you are now to where you want to be, you have to understand that it's not going to be a straight path. It's going to be an indirect route that you're going to have to take because it's going to be full of obstacles. And once you can understand that there are going to be obstacles and that you can overcome and jump over these hurdles, then you're going to figure it out, right? FIO. F-I-O. Figure it out. A lot of us tend to hit these obstacles, and then we come up with an excuse as to why we can't overcome the obstacle. And all that excuse does is it tells us that we can't do this. It lowers our confidence, and it causes us to give up and fail. And we quit. And we never get to where we want to go. We never get to point B because we have this expectation that it's supposed to be a straight line. When in all reality, that's not how it is. But the cool thing about life is that all of these obstacles, they're going to teach you things. They're going to teach you how to become better. They're going to teach you how to run faster in that path. And all of us are going to face obstacles. Like I said, it's an inevitable part of life. And if you're somebody out there who thinks that life is going to be easy and that you're hoping for an easy life, well, then you're being a little bit naive. Why would you want an easy life? Tough times build tough people. Easy times build soft people. It's 100% true, and that's what's going on in our society today. There are far too many soft people because we've been babied and people don't understand what actual pain is. But a lot of us, we refuse to make a change in our life because we have this addiction, because we won't face the trauma, because we find comfort in that addiction. We find comfort in that pain. And we waste our lives desperately wanting to stop the cycle, to stop the addiction. But many of us are just too afraid because it's all we know. This addiction is, it's weird to say, but like, I speak from personal experience that my eating disorder was almost comforting. Like, it was a demon that was hanging on and clinging to me that I liked the warm embrace. And I know that sounds kind of sick, and people are like confused, but if you have an addiction, or if you've been through an addiction, whether it be drugs, alcohol, porn, sex, whatever it is, you understand what I'm saying. And there are people out there who are in that part of their life where they have that addiction and they so desperately know that they want to make this change, but they don't know how because they find comfort in the pain. And if you're unhealthy, if you're overweight, and you know that you need to make the change, right? You're finding comfort in that pain because it's much more comfortable for you to go to McDonald's and get a burger than it is to get uncomfortable and go to the gym because you think that everybody's going to judge you when you go there. That's not how it is, though. So what you have to do is you have to break that cycle. You have to identify the habit the habit loop that is that addiction. Right, guys? A habit, if you've read the book Atomic Habits, if you've read the book The Power of Habits, then you know that the habit loop, or what a habit is made of, is a trigger or a cue, what sets off the habit, the routine, which is the actual habit, and then the reward, which is really, truly the reason as to why we actually do that routine, because if there was no reward, why the hell would we do it? So a lot of us were addicted to something. For example, I was addicted to starving myself. And I wasn't able to make that change until I identified and became aware of the detrimental effects it was putting in my life. So when I can identify the habit loop looking back, I can think, okay, the trigger or the cue to the routine, which the routine was starving myself. The trigger or the cue was the emotional stress and anxiety that I was not able to process. Stress, bad things, right? The reward was I was able to feel something instead of feeling nothing at all. I felt starvation. I felt pain. Instead of feeling completely numb because I was so afraid that I was going to kill myself, because I felt nothing. And I know that it's really hard to explain to somebody who's never been in that position. But when you feel that numb, it's terrifying. And you don't know what to do. So what you have to do is you have to identify your trigger, your cue. What's setting off this addiction? Why are you doing this addiction? What's the reward to it? And what you have to do is you have to make a plan, experiment with different routines to replace that bad habit or that addiction, and create the loop that the ideal version of you would do. The ideal version of who I wanted to be 5 years ago when I was starving myself, it was a strong athlete. It was somebody who was a coach. It was somebody in a powerful position who was leading people to become the best version of themselves. That's what I wanted to be. But I didn't know how to get there. So every day, when I wanted to starve myself, instead of doing that, I said, okay, what would the ideal version of myself do? What would the athlete do? Well, the athlete would have a meal. The athlete would fuel her body so that I could have better workouts, so I can recover better, so I can actually earn results and build the muscle that I want. So when you don't want to do it, when you're too tired, when you're too lazy, when you want to just find comfort in that addiction again, think about the person that you're trying to become. Because they are depending on you right now. The person you are today grows into that person that you want to be. So the person that you want to be is depending on you right now. And it's depending on you to make the right choices today. Look, I know it's hard, but you can't run away from this trauma and this pain forever. You can't run away from these emotions. Eventually you're going to have to process them. It sucks. And over the last week, I've kind of had like a moment where, like I said the other day, I was depressed for no reason. And I was able to, by talking to a friend, come to the conclusion that I was running away from unprocessed trauma from my childhood. And when I'm able to face that and actually process it, it kind of relieves a lot of tension in my chest. I find a lot of mental clarity. That's why I journal so much, because writing out my emotions and putting them on paper gets that out of my head, and it makes me realize that these things that have happened in my past, they've given me power to become the person I am today and be able to help other people overcome what I've overcome. And I truly believe that everything happens for a reason. And when you can overcome trauma and navigate through it, you learn how strong you can be. I mean, my eating disorder was my addiction. And eventually I said enough is enough. And people ask me, okay, well, how did you kind of flip that switch? And it's really tough for me to remember those times, but all I remember looking back is how I was barely able to function. I remember waking up in the morning crying because I could barely lift my body out of bed. I remember riding the bus to the gym and crying because I was so tired and just wanted to go home and sleep. But I couldn't give myself a break because that's bad, right? When I would come home every night and my mother would be just crying because she was so upset that she couldn't do anything about me because I was so thick-skulled and I had no idea that there was a problem. That's when I was able to say enough is enough. And the biggest thing that happened to me was being able to face reality and look at myself in the mirror and see the person who I was. And it was terrifying. That's when I said enough is enough. So I didn't overcome this addiction overnight. It didn't take a week, it didn't take a month, it didn't take 3 months. It took a very long time of me showing up for myself, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one foot, one step at a time, literally left foot, right foot, always moving forward and away from my demons, right? It takes time. And it's okay that it takes time. That's what it's supposed to be like. But it's not okay for you to find comfort in the pain and the addiction that's holding you back from living your best life. Because most of us go through life trying to be somebody we are not, just to impress other people around us. And that's bullshit. So live your life, live a life that you can be proud of, and do what's important to you. Be genuinely you. Guys, that's all that I have for today. I'm going to expand upon this topic and get a little bit deeper into my story. I'm also going to have a couple more guests on over the next couple of weeks, telling their story about not just overcoming their addiction, their pain, their trauma, but also just being able to become the best version of you. So, guys, if you found value from this podcast, please share it with one person, because I want to be able to help one person at a time. And if one person out there can hear this message and make a change in their life, or be able to overcome their addiction, or be able to actually start the process of breaking the cycle and living their best life, then I win, because that's all that I want. I have no idea how to even monetize a podcast, and I don't care to. All I want to do is share information through my story, through my experience, through my journey. Guys, I hope this helped. And please go out today and do one thing that's going to make yourself 1% better. Love you guys.